this kind of data. The specifics of this depend on the precise design, and there's a lot of different types of design. I'm going to go over one, but I want to highlight that this paper here by Bolt, I guess, I don't know. This person and their colleagues, they have a design where they vary a ton of different ways of manipulating their experimental variable and a ton of different ways of measuring their stimuli, so that they have hundreds and hundreds of essentially like mini studies that are kind of varying these different features. And this is like their version of this is kind of what I'm suggesting, but like to the max. So if you want to know like the most ambitious way to do it, they're the people to look at. But Clifford and Rainey, they have a nice paper where they outline, I think, less ambitious but more attainable versions of this. So what I'm going to cover here is examples where participants respond to different stimuli. So what that means is that the participant gets a sample of stimuli from some, bank or list of possible stimuli, and they complete the study in response to that stimuli. So I'm going to do it with political issues, but the same thing works with faces. So when people do face studies, it also works with social groups, because Alex Koch's work who I mentioned before, he does some similar types of analyses for that. If a person who's like a cognitive psychologist doing lexical decisions, understanding how people interpret words, this would fit with that. And I've seen people do this kind of thing with different kinds of moral violations. So a lot of different study designs. But the idea here is that participants responding to multiple different types of stimuli. So what we do with these is, so we have participants, they complete the study, they do it into a bunch of different stimuli, and so then these end up being multi-level models because you have stimuli nested within people, right? So there's different levels to this. It's kind of like the classic examples for multi-level models are students nested in classrooms or participants nested within countries. Here, it's the same idea, just kind of drop down a level. Our level 2 in the multi-level model is participant. Level 1 is the stimuli. You predict your outcome, that's on the left. You have your experimental treatment as your key predictor. And then you include two types of random variation. Oh, I have arrows here. So yeah, this is the thing you're predicting. This is the experimental manipulation. And then here, this is telling the model that the response might vary by stimuli and the treatment might vary by stimuli. So that so in the case of like a political issue study, all issues may not have the same kind of mean level outcome, and they all might have, the experimental manipulation might work differently for different issues. And then this is a random effect and a random slope for participant. It's the same kind of idea as the stimuli, but at the participant level. So it suggests that some participants might be higher or lower on our outcome variables, but then also that treatment might differ. So it works more strongly for some participants than for others. And so this part here addresses the fact that we have stimuli nested in people, but this here helps us, this part of the model works to help us generalize our estimate of the treatment effect here, or the effect of our experimental condition, helps us generalize that across the issues. Because this here is estimating the sample variance in the population from the stimulus. So with this, we get more generalizable results across stimuli. Not across samples. That requires a different kind of study design. We need to collect more samples. My data is just from US Americans. It's a representative sample of US Americans, so that's nice, but I wouldn't expect it to generalize beyond that. But I do predict that within that sample, we could generalize to many other issues, and that if we randomly pick other issues, we would expect something within that same result. It also does not substantially increase the cost of this study. So this study, we included a bunch of different measures that I didn't include here. And the whole thing was about 12 minutes long. The additional issues that we asked people to respond to, so 10 instead of 1, only added about 3 minutes. So this whole study would have been, 9, 10 minutes without the extra. But now we have all this additional information and can be much more confident in our results just by adding this additional data. So I think this is almost cost-free, except for maybe it takes a little bit longer to analyze the data. There are different extensions of this type of design in these two papers that I think are really interesting. So one that Clifford and Rainey talked about is generalizing across different types of experimental manipulations. So there's lots of different ways that you could think about manipulating many topics. And there's some studies that do this, and they then they outline how you can analyze this statistically and how to think about that. Notably, doing a bunch of different experimental manipulations can be more costly, especially in a between subjects design, right? If you go from having a 2 study, and then we're like, okay, well, we're going to do it 8 different ways, that becomes a 16 condition study. And if you have 100 person per conditions, you can see that you can do that here. It gets ridiculous. But there are other ways. In our study, for example, with this party cues, one thing we thought about doing, but didn't because we're just worried about the overall complexity of our results and describing it to people accurately. We thought about manipulating the different types of party cues. So we said Democratic leaders support this issue, Republican leaders say this about the issue. But we could have said the politician name instead. We could have said other politicians that also have the same views, but are just different. So instead of Trump and Biden, who are like the presidential candidates at the time, there's other Republicans that are important in government, other Democrats that are important in government. We could have said them. We could have said just Republican voters, Democratic voters. These are all different ways that we could have manipulated that. We could have included pictures, not pictures. You could think about a number of ways that we could have done that.